Hello everyone, welcome to the What If Anime YouTube channel. Today, we are diving into an exciting new story that will take your imagination to the next level. Let's get started. What if Naruto was the Chakra master in HOTD and got Harem Kushina, right? It was your typical morning in the large city of Tokunosu. It was April and the school year had just begun, and thousands of students were excited and ready for the new year. Thought quite a few of them just wanted to stay in bed. Naruto! Wake up, will ya? You have to get ready for school, shouted an extraordinarily beautiful woman with crimson hair that cascaded down her shoulders and reached her mid-back. She had thrown open the door to his room and her violet eyes were staring at his still form. He appeared to be sweating all over and was tossing and turning like he was having a nightmare. Kushina had taken the back of her hand and rested it against Naruto's forehead. He was hot to the touch. Rushing to the bathroom to get a cool rag, she had planted it on his head in an attempt to cool his raging fever. She took notice that Naruto was whispering something, placing her ear close enough to hear it. "Madara, don't you freaking do it. I'll freaking kill you, you bastard." She didn't know who this Madara was, but his body temperature felt like it was going down. Letting out a sigh of relief, if it had gone any higher, she was going to rush him to the emergency room. Checking his alarm for the time, they had about an hour and 15 minutes before classes began. 30 minutes later. Kushina only left Naruto's side when she needed to get changed the towel that was on his forehead. His fever had gone down considerably, though she didn't hesitate to call the school to inform them of her situation. It was going to be her first day teaching there too. She had probably left a bad impression on the students and other faculty staff. Not like she cared. When it came to her son, nothing else mattered. He was the last of her direct family. Her parents had passed away before Naruto was born, and she had divorced her ex-husband when she discovered he was having an affair. Just the thought of Minato brought a bitter taste in her mouth. They had met in high school and he was one of the few friends she had made. They had gone on a couple of dates during high school, though they had gotten into a relationship during college. Not 6 years later they were married and had Naruto. Though after a couple of years he had become distant. One day she had come home and found one of his coworkers in their bed. Maybe Minato had forgotten why she was called the Red Hot Habanero in high school. She had been very thorough in reminding him and his little slut. Not long after, she filed for divorce and won the ensuing case for Naruto's custody. She had gone back to her maiden name and her family had pulled some strings so Naruto would have it as well. The Uzumaki clan was a clan with a long history in Japan, dating back to the Edo period, having been renowned for their prowess in battle and their vibrant red hair. While most of the clan had lived on the island east of Japan, Uzushio was named after some of the whirlpools that surrounded it. Kushina was one of the few who had left their ancestral home, wanting to see the world instead of being stuck on the same island she had lived on since she was a baby. At first, it was exhilarating seeing new places, different cultures, and people. It still was at times, though now she wasn't the naive girl who was enamored by such pointless things. Though Naruto began to stir, which broke her out of her thoughts. "What hit me to Bayo?" Rubbing the back of his head. His vision was blurry, and he rubbed his weary eyes in an attempt to clear his vision, only to come face to face with his mother. Her violet eyes were filled with worry, and her beautiful face had a relief-filled smile. He stared at her in shock. She had been killed protecting him. Then how was she alive right now? He had a million questions right now, though seeing his mother once again, quickly embracing her, holding her tightly. "Kaa-chan," he sobbed out quietly, holding her form tightly against his body. He just sat there and cried into her shoulder while hugging the living daylights out of Kushina. Kushina was shocked at first. She had been extra careful not to say her catchphrase around Naruto so he wouldn't pick on her strange way of speaking. Though her shock had quickly faded and she opted to just support Naruto. All of her maternal alarm bells were ringing. He had sounded so mentally drained. Yesterday he was just fine. They spent their regular time together. They had always been close, spending the weekends together watching movies and doing all sorts of things. Though right now he seemed so vulnerable. Just before he hugged her she saw a mirage of emotions flashing in his eyes. Immense sadness and loneliness were just a few of them. Though her motherly instincts had taken over, and she returned the hug instantly. She didn't know what was going on or what had happened. She just knew that he needed her to be there for him. They had just sat there together in the embrace in silence. Kushina was just rubbing his back soothingly to comfort him. Rubbing his face with his arm to brush away the tears, he moved out of the embrace. He hated seeming so vulnerable, though when he saw her again, he couldn't control himself. He'd spent 16 years without knowing either of his parents. The one time he met her, she helped him restrain Kurama, and the conversation he had with her was probably one of the best moments in his life. "Naruto, honey, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost or something," said the redhead, her voice filled with worry as her violet eyes met his cerulean blue orbs, one of her hands cupping his cheek lovingly. "Nothing's wrong, Ka-chan. I'm just really happy to see you," flashing Kushina a bright smile, which she returned. God, his mother was a beauty. Just seeing that bright smile and the warmth that emanated from her again made everything he had endured in the war worth it. The last thing he could remember was Madara ripping Kurama out of his gut, gritting his teeth, just when they had become friends, and Kurama was gone just like that. That bastard was responsible for the deaths of dozens of people he cared about. Though if died when Kurama was extracted from him, then where was he now? "Well, I'm just glad you're alright now. You gave me a real scare. I was this close from rushing you to the hospital. Just rest up. I'm going to get changed and bring some breakfast up to you." Kushina beamed at him as she made her way out of the room and leaving Naruto alone. As she was leaving, Naruto took notice of her clothing. Kushina was dressed similarly to the businessman and woman. She mentioned that she trained as a kunoichi, though he couldn't recall much else. Kushina was wearing a white t-shirt and form-fitting black pants that had reached her calves. Her shirt hugged her chest, doing little to hide her bountiful breasts. The form-fitting pants hugged her slim legs and ass. Naruto's eyes were glued to her form as she was walking away. It was almost as if she felt his eyes, and she turned around with an alluring smile on her face. "What's wrong, Naruto-kun? See something you like?" Kushina teased effortlessly. Naruto had turned bright red and smacked himself, causing her to laugh and walk out of the room. After her divorce, she hadn't sought out another partner romantically or sexually. She had a child to raise and no time to play around. Naruto would be the only man she would need in her life. Though she couldn't help herself when she got a little excited when she caught Naruto. She knew it was wrong to get hot at the thought of her son staring at her ass. After all the martial arts classes Naruto had taken, his physique was toned thanks to them. He was probably one of the most attractive men she had seen, patting herself on the back for creating such a handsome son. He had even taught her some moves so she could defend herself should the need arise. Naruto was always the talk of the girls in her class at the last school she had worked at. She could tell why too. He was incredibly handsome and was a rolling mass of muscle. Now she was all hot and bothered. Breakfast would come later. Right now she needed some alone time with Naruto in his room. Naruto hadn't stopped slapping himself. He stared at his mother's ass and enjoyed it. What sick freak fantasized about his mother? Though he couldn't help it, she hadn't been a major part of his life due to her death. He couldn't help but see her as the beautiful woman she was. Her voluptuous figure was alluring. While he was still a virgin, he was Ero-senen's student. Having proofread some of his Ika Ika series, he couldn't help but fantasize about her. Kami, damn these hormones. Slapping himself for good measure, he decided to get up and look out the window. Curious as to where he was, pushing the curtains aside. Naruto was shocked to find a bustling city, which was not Konoha or any other city or town he had been to. There were carts with 4 wheels that were being propelled on the ground at fast speeds, and there were giant whales in the air flying. Now some people thought he was an idiot, though that may have been the case sometimes. It was just a part of his mask most of the time though. No village had any buildings rising to meet the clouds. Some of them were as tall as a bijou. If he wasn't in the elemental nations, where the hell was he? 2 months later. Walking through the halls of Fujimi Academy was Saya Takagi. It was just another boring day at school. Being the genius that she was, even slacking off, she made the best grades in all her classes. Walking into her science class, she glanced at the clock. It was the 6th period and the day was almost over. Their teacher had recently been hired and she was one of the few she respected and listened to. even though Uzumaki-sensei was absent on the first day of school. Uzumaki-sensei's son had a terrible fever. Surprisingly, he was in the same grade as her. Speaking of the redhead son, Naruto had walked in and took a seat by the window. He was an anomaly to Saya. He had made pretty good grades in all his classes, excelling in the physical classes and electives. Most of the girls thought he was extremely handsome, which he was. Much to the disdain of all the boys, it was hard to try and date someone when all they talked about was another guy. That's what confused her. He had some of the best traits most girls were looking for. He was polite, intelligent, and strong. Yet he hadn't tried to date any of them. Though one thing was for sure. He was extremely protective of his mother. Some of the boys had hit on her and made some extremely vulgar remarks. Unfortunately for them, Naruto was close by. Just as Uzumaki-sensei was going to reprimand them, he had beat the ever-loving garbage out of them. The vicious beating had sent a message to all of the boys: disrespect or say anything foul about my mother, and you'll be next. He even went as far as to beating the kendo instructor in a spar when he had been way too friendly with Uzumaki-sensei. Seiko Busujima, the school captain of the kendo team, had watched over it. The fight was entirely one-sided. Naruto didn't have a fighting style. It was just him improvising. Though he knew how to block and strike. Busujima-senpai went as far as to say that Naruto would be a worthy adversary for her. She even personally invited him to the kendo club, which he turned down surprisingly. Usually any sane man would want to be close to someone as beautiful as Busujima-senpai. Though his reasoning she had heard from listening to someone gossip was that he had said that he had nothing to learn from joining. Though she assumed he had said it respectively. He didn't seem like an arrogant person at all. It seemed as if he despised arrogant individuals. Those and bullies. He had always gotten into confrontations with those kinds of people. With Naruto. Naruto just stared out of the window looking out at the blue sky. Honestly, he had no idea why he was alive. He had his bijou ripped out of him, and then he just woke up here. Anyone else aside from his mother, who was also alive here, died instantly after such an ordeal. It almost seemed like some form of divine intervention. He had adjusted to living here well. He finally had that parent bond he longed for all those years ago. He wasn't fighting in some damned war all because of a delusional madman's dream. At least life here was relatively peaceful, compared to the elemental nations where the main business was being a shinobi, a hired killer, while he was sure there were some here. It wasn't as high in demand as the elemental nations. Here people could make an honest living doing honest work. That didn't mean everything here was perfect. In all honesty, it wasn't. He had learned the country he was residing in was one of the better off ones compared to the rest of the world. Even here in Japan, crime was everywhere. People were stealing things, committing murders, and selling drugs. Not to mention with the technology they had, the wars that had been fought were devastating. While in the elemental nations, sure, there were individuals like himself that could level entire mountains. Though he didn't know if he could do that anymore. It was one of the things that were bugging him. His chakra reserves had reduced to what he would assume a typical Chunin's would be. While he could just fix this by training rigorously, exhausting them and letting them refill again. It took him so much longer than normal to recharge them. Even going into sage mode took almost 3 times as long. At least he could still use chakra. His reflexes, keen eyesight, strength, and stamina were the same, thankfully. He just couldn't go around throwing a Rasengan at everything. Naruto, focus on class, will ya? Kushina had said, calling out in front of the entire class. Letting out a sigh, his mom always loved to embarrass him with any chance she got. Giving her a nod, Kushina gave him a radiant smile. Her gorgeous red locks framing her beautiful face. A clip had prevented the hair from getting in the way of her gorgeous purple eyes. Kushina was the prettiest woman on the planet in his eyes. Unlike her garments at home that left little to the imagination. She was dressed professionally. A slate blue lightweight cardigan, and a white skirt that had reached her knees. No makeup was on her creamy white fair skin. He still had no idea why his father would cheat on her. Frankly, he didn't care either. Kushina had told him all about it, though she was quite confused when he asked where Minato was. Deciding not to think about him any longer, he just began working on the assignment she had given the class. 2 months later. Infection outbreak. The screams of people could be heard throughout the dark hallways of Fujima Academy. There was an announcement about violence breaking out, followed by the deathly screams of the man giving it. The ensuing panic that followed was total anarchy. People were trampling all over each other to escape. All semblance of humanity was gone, and all that remained was self-preservation. Not like it mattered as soon as they ran into those things. It had all went to hell. Naruto had waited out the initial panic that he knew would ensue. He only had one goal: find his mother and get the hell out of Dodge. Silently creeping through the blood and gore-covered hallways, coming across 3 students, all of which were pale in color and covered in blood. His icy cerulean eyes narrowed. He was just about to introduce them to his taijutsu when they had just walked past him as if they couldn't see him. Crouching down and grabbing a piece of debris, he threw it down the hall. This garnered a reaction from the trio as they growled and clumsily made their way to the noise. If they were attracted by noise, this would be easy since he was a trained shinobi. He had a hidden pouch of ninja tools that he always kept with him just in case of emergencies. Drawing a pair of kunai, he continued down the hall towards his mother's room. Running up another flight of stairs, he saw 2 students. Saya Takagi and Kota Hirano, if he remembered correctly. The 2 had some blood on them, though they still retained the color of skin, and Kota was pointing a modified weapon at him. Saya had waved him over, though she held a finger over her mouth signaling him to be silent. Quickly making his way over to the duo, he scanned the area around them and determined it to be safe for the time being. Uzumaki-san, good to see someone who uses their brain. We're headed to the staff room to get the keys to a car and leave. Care to join us? Saya had said to Naruto in a hushed tone. No, I don't plan on leaving without my mother. Will you 2 be alright if I leave you? Those things are attracted to noise. He whispered back, still scanning the area. Some of those things had begun walking towards them. Dispatching them with ease, he crouched back down by the duo who were staring at him with awe. Saya and Hirano had struggled with a ranged weapon to take out a small group of them, and Naruto had just taken out 5 of them with his kunai with ease. He was someone you would want to protect you in this scenario. After I get her, I'll meet you 2 there, okay? Naruto said in a rushed tone as he silently ran away, not waiting for their response. Kushina's room was just another flight of stairs above him. 10 minutes later. The lack of blood on the walls and floor eased him just a little bit. If they hadn't reached this area, then hopefully she was safe. She didn't have a class right now, though that didn't mean she had gone to look for him. He prayed to whatever god there was that she had just locked up and waited for him. Arriving in front of her door, he could hear a small group of people whispering to each other, though he couldn't make any of it out. Knocking softly on it, the voices had stopped. Ka-chan, are you in there? Naruto voiced out softly, not wanting to draw the attention of the dead. Hearing a soft gasp and rushed steps, the door slid open. His eyes watered at the sight as he felt a weight lifted off of his shoulders. There was Kushina Uzumaki. She was crying and had quickly hugged him. Returning it without a second thought, he hugged her tightly. It would have been some cruel joke if whatever deity was up there had taken her from him again. Kushina looked a little shaken up, but besides that, she was fine. Kushina had been tutoring a couple of students when the blood-curdling screams came over the intercom. Not too long after that, the spine-chilling screams were all over the academy. Her motherly instincts were yelling at her to find Naruto and leave. Though when she looked out of the window into the courtyard, it was absolute carnage. She had just prayed to whatever deity there was to protect her son. A loud noise had interrupted the 2's reunion. One of the students hiding inside the room had knocked something over. Naruto could already hear the dead staggering down the hall towards them. Stepping away from Kushina, he gently pushed her back into the room. Stay quiet, do not leave this room. No matter what you hear outside. Naruto had voiced in a tone that left no room for argument. Kushina had peeked back into the hall and saw the oncoming group of the dead. Every fiber of her being had wanted to take Naruto and run. Call her a worthless teacher for wanting to abandon her students. She could care less. She had seen what they were capable of, and her son wanted to face dozens of them by himself. They'd torn people apart in seconds, and he wanted to charge into them alone. Just as she was about to protest, Naruto gave her a gentle smile. While he didn't know the students, he wanted to protect them and her. If it was this bad in a gated-off academy, he couldn't picture how bad the streets would be. Every person he saved now would be one less of them he had to kill. Dashing down the hall, he could hear Kushina's cry out his name in a choked voice. His heart clenched at hearing how pained she sounded. He'd have to make it up to her in some sort of way, now that the world's gone to garbage. He'd definitely need to improvise. Shaking his head to clear his thoughts and focus on the upcoming fight, his cerulean eyes narrowed at the dozen or so corpses. Being surrounded by them was something he didn't want happening. With Takashi and Co. Staff room. I don't think we should wait much longer for him. It's beginning to get dark, said the second-year Takashi Komuro. This entire situation had everyone in the room a little unsettled. The news broadcast they had just watched didn't help any either. Everyone was already on edge due to the recent events. The news broadcast they had just watched didn't help any either. Every other country in the world was affected by whatever disease this was. In a matter of hours, the world they knew was gone. While Naruto would be a capable person on our team, I have to agree with Komuro-kun, said Siko, voicing her opinion. They were burning what precious daylight they had left. They were a couple of miles away from the city, and if it was this bad here, the city would be a living hell to go through. Saya bit her lip. Both of them were right. They'd waited long enough for Naruto. What's to say he hadn't left with his mother anyways? Fine, let's go. All of them had gotten into the planned formation they had talked over. Takashi in the center, with Rei on the left flank, and Siko handling the right flank, while Shizuka and Saya were in the center, leaving Koto to bring up the rear. Just as they were about to rush out of the door, the moans and groans of the dead outside had stopped. Sliding the door open, they saw the blonde they had been waiting for. He removed a kunai knife from the skull of a corpse on the ground. Kushina was just beside the doorway to the staff room, wrapped in Naruto's jacket. Care to fill me on your plan? Naruto said as he placed the kunai back in its pouch that was strapped to his leg. We're going to the bus and helping survivors for now, said Saya. Naruto nodded at the plan. All right, let's get going. Ka-chan, if you could get in the middle of the formation, I'll help bring up the rear, Naruto said, and they all nodded. Having someone who was able to take out a group of the dead silently wasn't to be questioned. They had made their way outside with relative ease. Blood and corpses littered the campus as they stood next to a guardrail. A large group of undead had amassed in the courtyard. It was rather silent now, besides the groans of the dead. Don't begin fighting unless you need to, said Siko seriously as they stared down at the horde. They respond to sound and are strong enough to break down a door. If they get a hold of you, you're going to get eaten, added Saya. A gust of wind blew past them, filling their nostrils with the foul smell of death. A scream of terror was heard by the group, and they all went into action. Naruto saw 6 students, 3 males, and 3 women, stuck on a staircase with the dead coming from both sides. Kota had taken one of them down with his improvised gun, while Naruto and Siko had leapt from the balcony above. Naruto drove a kunai into the skull of one of them and threw a kunai embedding it in the skull of an undead female student. Siko had delivered swift yet powerful blows to the skulls of the undead closer to the group, while Takashi guarded Kushina, Shizuka, and Saya. Rei had dispatched of the undead at the foot of the stairs. Naruto had looked the group of 6 over. None of them appeared to have any wounds. Have any of you been bitten? Said Siko as she gripped her bakken firmly. Her blue eyes narrowed at them. And no, none of us have been bitten, stammered a girl with short black hair. We're getting out of here. Want to come with us? Said Naruto as he holstered his kunai and went to pick out the other one from the skull of the zombie. Knowing how the world is now, it was going to be hard to find supplies, weapons included. Why, yes, we would, stuttered the same girl, obviously shaken up by the ordeal. Naruto grimaced. A larger group meant they would go slower, and the possibility of one of them making noise increased. They'd also go through whatever supplies they gathered faster. Filling his thoughts for later, the group began making their way to the parking lot. 15 minutes later, Naruto sat down on the stairs and relaxed for just a moment. Kushina had sat beside him and pinched his cheek. Naruto pouted at her. She was glaring at him while still pinching his cheek. I have a bunch of questions for you, mister, Kushina said quietly as she released his cheek. While she was thankful for Naruto's skills, she couldn't help but have inquiries about them. Alright, Ka-chan, I'll answer them later. Just let me rest for a little bit, Naruto replied while rubbing his sore cheek. He'd been lacing his kunai with wind chakra so they wouldn't get dulled since he was using them constantly. His reserves were around 65% if he guessed right. Though he wanted to keep the use of his chakra to a minimum. With how chaotic the last couple of hours had been, he didn't know what the night had in store for them. We need someone to validify if they're attracted to noise, said Siko as Naruto listened in on the conversation they were having. Taking out a kunai, Naruto offered it to Kushina. While ideally, he wouldn't want any of those things near her, from past experiences had taught him to be prepared for anything. I'll go, said Takashi suddenly as he rubbed his eyes. Both Siko and Rei had protested, but he stood firm. Naruto respected Takashi for his courage. Not many people would volunteer going into that hellhole down there. There were probably 30 of them just lumbering around the lockers. If anything happened, Naruto would intervene while keeping the noise to a minimum. Not too long after Takashi had gone down there, he signaled Siko, and they had begun exiting the building. Naruto held Kushina's hand as they silently made their way to the door, being wary of all the undead around them. Outside. Just as they all made their way out, there was a resounding noise from inside the building. One of the students had banged his makeshift weapon against the railing of the stairs as he made his way down. Run! Takashi yelled, and not a second later every single one of the dead was making their way to them. Stay close to me, Naruto told Kushina as the group made a mad dash to the bus on the other side of the parking lot. The parking lot was crawling with them. Naruto, Takashi, Siko, and Rei were trying their best to clear a path for the group behind them. Naruto threw some shuriken and went through hand signs. This jutsu would take a chunk out of his already dwindling reserves. Ninpu, Shuriken Kaiga Bunshin no Jutsu, Ninja Art, Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu. Everyone stared in awe at what had just happened. Naruto had thrown one shuriken and it had turned into 30. It had just about cleared the path to the bus. Though now wasn't the time to question what had just happened. Siko had taken point and with a powerful strike cleared out the last zombie in front of the bus. Naruto and Siko were defending the entrance to the bus as what was left of the group boarded. They could still hear the screams of the students they had rescued minutes ago were being devoured. Busujima-senpai, you go ahead and get on, Naruto said as he buried a kunai into the head of a faculty member. Siko nodded and ran inside, quickly followed by Naruto as the bus's engine roared to life. As he was about to shut the door, they heard someone shouting. Help us! Yelled a student. Naruto looked out the window and saw Koichi Shido and growled. He was one of the teachers that had made the most advances on his mother despite her refusing all of them. His feelings for the man were shared by both Siko, who was scowling, and Rei. Hold on just a little longer, said Takashi, who was grabbing his baseball bat and was about to run out the door to assist them. Don't save him, Takashi. He deserves to die, said Rei furiously. As they were debating on helping him or not, Naruto heard a cry of agony and looked towards it. Shido had just kicked a student in the face who was now writhing in pain. It didn't take a genius to know the man had kicked him in the face. The screams of the student had attracted a considerable amount of the swarm as Shido made his way onto the bus. You'll regret saving him, said Rei with a deep scowl as she glared at Shido. Forced to take a seat since Shizuka floored the gas and ran over some of the dead as she rammed through the gate. Kushina was giving Naruto a worried look as he took controlled breaths. She had noticed that ever since that dreaded fever that Naruto was slightly different. He had become very mature and even more protective of her. Resting her head on his shoulder, she just hoped they would get through this together. Minutes after escaping the school, Naruto's piercing cerulean eyes bore holes into Koichi Shido as he choked the man. While the others probably didn't see or notice it, Naruto saw the man kick a student in the face to draw the attention of the dead. Naruto knew a snake when he saw one, and this man reeked of cowardice. He wouldn't think twice before sacrificing anyone in their group if it benefited him. Just a couple minutes ago he had implied that he would be the best candidate for leading them. Just a glint in his eyes told Naruto everything he needed to know. "Hey, let go of him, you bastard!" yelled the student with hair that was dyed blonde as he grabbed one of Naruto's arms. Before anyone could blink, he was on the ground writhing in pain, clutching at his chest. Naruto's eyes never left Shido's as he glared at him. Shido's yellow beady eyes were full of fear as he grabbed at Naruto's hands, trying his best to lessen the blonde's grip on his throat. "You think I didn't see the shit you pulled back at the school? How you kicked that student in the face and left him to die?" Naruto growled out. Everyone had gasped at what he revealed. Shido had just begun to lose consciousness, and Naruto intended to kill him then and there. That is until Shizuka stepped on the brakes of the bus. "I've had it. I can't drive with all this commotion," Shizuka said with an exasperated expression. "I'll finish you later." Naruto snarled out at Shido, who was coughing. Naruto delivered a solid punch to Shido's face, effectively knocking him out. Looking out the windows and only seeing a minute amount of dead, Naruto took notice of a convenience store just beside them that appeared relatively untouched. The clerk was just standing there staring into oblivion. "Komuro and Miyamoto-san guard the bus. Busujima-senpai and any other able-bodied person come help gather supplies. Shizuka-sensei stays at the wheel just in case we need to bail out fast," Naruto declared. "Who made you the boss all of a sudden?" screeched an orange-haired girl that was part of Shido's group. Naruto didn't bother to listen to anything else she said, departing the bus and being followed by the rest of his group. Not a single person from Shido's group came to help them. It would be their loss. Quickly dispatching of the dead in the area, Naruto stealthily made his way to the door. Pushing his way inside, he scanned the store, and the only person inside was the cashier. "Get all the food, water, and medicine you can," Naruto whispered out to the group. The small group had begun filling their bags with whatever they could find. Naruto felt someone sneaking up on him and turned around with and found Siko behind him. "Sorry to startle you, Uzumaki-kun, I just wanted to talk to you," Siko had said with an apologetic tone. "Just call me Naruto, please," Naruto replied while giving her a small smile. He'd let his emotions get the better of him on the bus. He'd seen enough of Shido's kind to tell that he was a manipulative bastard. Deciding to focus on the task at hand, Naruto would deal with the snake later. The smile Siko gave him would have made any lesser man blush with her shiny pink lips and beautiful purple hair. Being a student of the most renowned pervert in the elemental nations, he had some resilience to her charm. Give her a couple of years and she'd probably rival the natural beauty his mother had. "Well, Naruto-san, you can just call me Siko. It's like you've been training your entire life. The fluidity in your movements and your speed." She had a knowing tone. She knew something was suspicious about him. She wasn't wrong. From the age of 7 he had begun his training into becoming a shinobi. If only she knew he was holding back. "The same could be said for you, Siko-chan," Naruto replied as his cerulean eyes met her dark blue orbs. She stared at him in surprise at the use of her name, and couldn't help but laugh at how bold he was. Hearing her laugh brought a smile to his face. Despite how grim their given situation was, it was moments like these that you had to treasure. "You know, I've seen a lot of people fought a lot of people too. Not one of them has ever fought like you. Not to mention what you did with the shuriken," Siko had said to him while looking at him with a contemplative look on her face. Naruto scratched the back of his head as he thought of an answer. "Well, I trained myself for the most part, though later in my life. I had some help from my father's old sensei," his voice becoming sad at the mention of Jiraiya. His death still brought a pang of hurt to his heart. Sensing his sudden mood swing, Siko knew something had happened to his sensei. Naruto, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring up bad memories." "It's fine, you didn't know." "Yeah, that old geezer taught me a lot though," Naruto had replied, trying to make a joke to lift the depressing mood. Elsewhere in the store, Kushina was filling her bag with whatever medicine the convenience store offered. There were just basic painkillers, some gauze, and various other medical goods. Though her mind was elsewhere. She had never seen Naruto that furious before. Just the sheer rage she had seen in his eyes as his cold expression had unnerved her. All of it was focused on Shido. Naruto would have killed the man if it wasn't for Shizuka-san slamming her foot on the brakes of the bus. She knew Naruto only wanted to protect them. Shido was implying that their group needed him as the leader to manage their resources. He had said as one of the only 3 adults that he would be the most suitable individual for the role, which had implied that the rest of them were inferior to him, and that he would prevent any conflict from arising in their group. After his speech, it was followed with applause from his group. That's when Naruto had begun his vicious beating of the teacher. Feeling someone tapping on her shoulder, she turned to them quickly. Whoever it was had snuck up on her in complete silence. She let out a sigh of relief when she found it to be her son. "Kaa-chan, we're leaving now, come on," Naruto said softly as he offered her a hand since she was crouched on the ground. She gratefully accepted it, and he hoisted her up with ease, reaching down to pick up her bag full of various medical supplies and food. Naruto snatched it from her while giving her a grin. It was crazy to think that just minutes earlier he was about to kill a man. Not that she was fearful of her son, she knew he had her best interests in mind. "You know I don't like you snatching anything from me." Delivering a light smack to his head, in turn, he laughed much to her ire. "Naruto, what do you plan to do with Shido?" At this the blonde's mood became serious. Those cerulean eyes she loved had become icy, and his face was impassive. He's already manipulated his group to follow his will. He's the kind of man willing to do anything if it ensures his survival. I refuse to let anything happen to my friends, and especially you. If it comes to it, I'll kill him. Naruto's voice was bitter throughout the speech. He couldn't help but be angry when he talked about Shido. The bastard had reminded him of Kabuto and Orochimaru. He was trash that had abandoned the student that placed his trust in him. Not only that, but he proceeded to injure him so he could make it out safely. While Naruto was a naturally forgiving person, he wouldn't be taking any chances of leaving the man alive. A man like Shido wasn't to be trusted. He makes sweet promises to your face, just to plot against you as soon as you turned your back. "You're just my knight in shining armor, aren't you, Tebane?" Her loving voice was music to his ears. Her verbal take had come out to though she didn't seem to have a care in the world. "What have I done to deserve a son like you?" Kushina was giving him one of the most radiant smiles he's ever seen from her. Her silky red tresses that their clan was known for. Those luscious rosy lips, and creamy skin. Not to mention her mesmerizing violet eyes, she truly was the most gorgeous woman he's ever seen. It wasn't just her looks either. She was the most caring and cheerful person he had known. She always looked out for him, regardless of the situation. Though she was also one of the most impulsive, eccentric and irritable too. That just added to her beauty and made him love her even more. Probably more than a normal son should love his mother. "You've done more than you know. I love you, Kaa-chan, and I promise nothing will happen to you," Naruto had replied quietly, averting his eyes from her form. He didn't want to make things awkward between them, especially now. "I love you too. We'll finish talking later," Kushina replied, still smiling while cupping Naruto's cheek lovingly. Removing her hand, they both made their way out of the store, followed by the rest of the group. Stepping back into the bus, the door was quickly shut. "Took you guys long enough," grumbled Takashi, looking annoyed. Everyone from Shido's group had been mumbling to each other the entire time they were gathering supplies. It was rather boring watching. "Be quiet, Komuro. It was a good idea to stop and get all of this while we can," said Saya as she struggled to carry her bag full of goods onto the bus. Casting a glance back at Shido, the man was still knocked out. Just how strong was Naruto? They were the same age, and yet he displayed skill in martial arts that probably surpassed her father's ability. Turning her gaze to the blonde, his face had an impassive look as he stared at Shido. Unlike when he was choking Shido, where he had a look strong animosity to the man. It was the angriest she's ever seen him. A couple of months ago, she thought he was just an idiot who liked to play pranks. When shit hit the fan at the school, he'd become an entirely different person. It was as he flipped a switch. Gone was the prankster she loathed, replaced with a cold and calculative person who wanted to protect his friends. "And we're off." said the busted blonde at the steering wheel. The bus was moving at a decent speed, though they slowed down when they reached the tunnel they were supposed to turn into. It was blocked off by a bus that was on fire with dead bodies burning on the ground by it. "Mao, now we have to find another route," Shizuka complained as she began turning the bus around. The sun was beginning to fade as darkness began to enshroud the city. The various lamp posts and burning wreckage had continued to light up the city. People's screams and gunshots could be heard all over. Naruto turned around and looked at Shido's disheveled form as he lied down on a seat. One of the other students must have moved him, he summarized. While he didn't hate the man, he detested how he was trying to manipulate them. "What do you plan to do with him, Uzumaki-san?" Naruto turned to the brunette who was glaring at Shido. It didn't take a genius to realize that Rei Miyamoto absolutely loathed Koichi Shido. Even though Kurama was extracted from him, he could still relatively sense people's feelings. He knew when people were lying straight to your face like the third Hokage had when he asked why people detested him. He'd acted on impulse when he felt negative feelings emanating from the man. He didn't know exactly what Shido had planned. The man's group had already begun blindly listening to everything he preached. Blind followers were dangerous. They'd do whatever he asked them to do. The lecherous looks Shido had directed at Kushina and depravity he felt from the man. That was all it took for him to fly into a blind rage and almost kill him. For now he lives. If he does anything that threatens any of us, I won't hesitate to kill him. Rei nodded at him, a serious look on her face as she stared at the man's down form. "I don't agree with you, Uzumaki-san. We should just kill him now and be done with it." "Call me Naruto, damn it!" His sudden outburst had made a couple of the students in the back jump. Naruto frowned at them. He wasn't that much a violent person. "As I said, we'll deal with him tomorrow. For now, we just need to rest. Shizuka-sensei, will you be alright driving all night? If we don't run into any trouble." "I suppose it would be," Shizuka replied as she maneuvered the bus around some debris on the road. "If you begin to feel tired, I'll take over driving, Shizuka-san," Kushina volunteered. All these kids besides Shido's track team were hard at work protecting them, her son included. She had to pay them back somehow. "I'll keep that in mind, Kushina-san. Thank you for the offer." Naruto rested his head against the seat as Kushina started rummaging through the supplies in his bag. One by one everyone was beginning to sleep as the night progressed. Feeling his mother tap on his shoulder, he turned to her. Kushina was giving him a sweet smile, though the aura that emanated from her was screaming danger. "Why'd you grab these, mister?" In her hands was a box of condoms. He figured he should grab a box or two while he was there. Better safe than sorry was his mindset at the time. "I can explain," Naruto began nervously, though the look she gave him made him shut his mouth. Damn, she was scarier than the Shinigami. Crying internally at his misfortune. Kushina had continued to glare at him before she began giggling at him, being wary not to wake up anyone. "Well, at least you're being careful." In such a short time Naruto had grown into a man she could depend on. Whenever she had needed help around the house, Naruto was there. The past couple of months she hadn't needed to do anything around the house besides cook. Naruto had begun doting on her, and she adored it. Naruto was unlike any man she had met. Plenty of people had acknowledged her beauty as she matured. She was pretty and came from a very influential family. Both qualities attracted sleazy politicians and perverts. Both were people who just wanted to use her family name for their benefit, or just get into her pants. She made sure to avoid those kinds of people. Yet after such a long time, she thought she had found the one. Only for him to betray her trust by having an affair. Afterward, she'd lost all hope in finding the one. Though Naruto has been there for her ever since, taking up all the chores the man of the house would be responsible for. Always complimenting her and making sure nothing interfered with the time they spent together. Even now, with the world being a living hell, he still made her feel as if everything would be okay. "Well, it's getting late, Naruto. I'm going to go to sleep, you should too." "Good night, Naruto, I love you," murmured the yawning redhead as she rubbed her eyes. Kushina snuggled into Naruto's form and felt the warmth emanating from him, pulling her into a deep sleep. "I love you too." Naruto whispered to Kushina's sleeping form. It was like she had heard him because she smiled and laced their fingers together unconsciously. Leaning his head on hers, he let the sweet embrace of sleep take him as well. The second day of the outbreak. Midday. Shizuka yawned as she rested her head on the steering wheel. It had been this way since early in the morning. They had been caught up in the ensuing evacuation. They hadn't made much progress trying to cross the bridge. Everyone had woken up due to all the noise except for the Uzumaki duo and Hirano. Countless cars were honking their horns to try to get the line to move faster. Hundreds of people were walking along the sidewalk in an attempt to escape the onslaught of the dead. All the noise produced by such a large gathering of people attracted the dead. The police had established a perimeter, though it was gradually shrinking as the policemen were being overwhelmed. "They're close for a mother and son, huh?" Takashi mumbled to no one in particular as he looked at the duo. Saya had ignored him as she had a contemplative look on her face. "I can't blame them. With how everything is now, I'd want to take my loved ones and hold them close too," Ray stated while she watched the resting Uzumaki Saswell. Even asleep, they were both breathtaking in their own right. Turning her gaze to the back of the bus, she narrowed her eyes. Shido had woken up. His cheek was bruised due to Naruto. That had done little to hinder him as he resumed his indoctrination. Though this time he was painting Naruto to be a leader who used violence to those who didn't agree with him in line. It had been that way for most of the morning. It was a surprise the blonde had remained asleep for most of it too. "We must keep our pride. A brute like Naruto doesn't belong with us. He is but one who would try to silence our voice. Let us work together and triumph over him," Shido had preached to the small group that would listen. Saya had enough and elbowed Hirano to wake up him. "Hirano, wake up." This caused the chubby boy to stir. Drowsily opening his eyes, he came face the pink-haired girl who was staring at him in disgust. "Ah, Takagi-san. Good morning, sunshine." A drop of drool escaping his mouth as he spoke. "Why'd you fall asleep? And you're drooling too." The pinkette was waving her hand in disgust as she narrowed her eyes at her pudgy classmate. "Well, because of all of this," Hirano replied as he looked out the window. Shido hadn't stopped his preaching either, though they ignored most of it. "I think it would have been better if we went towards the suburbs," the black-haired boy continued as he looked at families carrying their belongings and children. Everyone was desperate to find a safe place to take refuge. "There are other ways to escape besides cars. Since it's too dangerous to be in the city, people are probably trying to flee to an island without the infected." Saya pointed at a jumbo jet in the sky to prove her point. "So a place like Okinawa? The American military forces stationed there aren't there to fight." The pink-haired genius shook her head, disagreeing with the pudgy black-haired boy. "They'd probably go to Hokkaido and Kyushu. Those islands should be okay if they manage the situation appropriately. Those airplanes are probably headed there. So we should go to a place like that." Hirano's eyes were closed and a smile on his face. "It's too late for that. The armed forces are probably keeping the situation under control. They've likely started to be strict about who they let in too," Saya replied with a thoughtful expression on her face. "Well, we could go to Yuzushio." A sudden voice broke Saya out of her thoughts. It was Naruto's mother. She had woken up a couple of minutes ago and was listening to her. Foreigners aren't allowed there without the Uzumaki clan's permission, so the infection surely hasn't reached there. Shido had been listening intently to the redhead, and a sadistic smile spread on his face. The crimson-haired goddess was his ticket to safety. He manipulated her to try and get on the island. While he was afraid of the redhead's son, he just need to run outside and say the man was trying to murder him. Surely the police would arrest Naruto. They'd let you and your son on the island. But what about the rest of us? Saya retorted. I'm the daughter of the patriarch of the clan. Ocha-sama is a kind man. He'd let you and your families come with us. Kushina responded with a smile. As one of the three adults there, it was their responsibility to take care of them and try to reassure them. Unlike Shido trying to brainwash the other students. A frown was on Kushina's face as she listened to the despicable man. Currently, he was caressing a female student's face sexually. Kushina looked towards her son who was sleeping peacefully. Feeling something in her hand, she looked down to find hers and Naruto's fingers interlocked together. She must have done it in her sleep. It felt so right though. Just a simple touch sent butterflies to her stomach. Kushina began nudging Naruto in a bid to wake him up. Not too long after, the blonde groggily opened his eyes. "You awake, sleepyhead?" Kushina teased the blonde. Naruto turned his gaze to the breathtaking form of his mother and gave her a small smile. Hi. Naruto yawned. He went to stand up and stretch when he felt a firm grip on his hand. Looking down, his face went red when he realized he and his mother were holding hands. Not in a friendly manner either, their fingers were still entwined since last night. He'd expected her to release it when she woke up. Looking towards her, cerulean eyes meeting violet ones. Kushina had averted her gaze from Naruto in a bid to try and hide the crimson blush on her face. "He's comparable to a recruitment officer for a religious cult." Siko's sudden voice from in front of them broke them out of their moment. Narrowing his eyes, Naruto turned around and looked towards Shido. The man hadn't realized he was awake and was still spouting nonsense. "Comparable to? No, that's precisely what he's doing," Saya replied to Siko as they looked towards Shido as well. Rei had a nasty scowl on her face, while Takashi just stared at the man. An obvious schism had formed between the two groups. While Naruto promised to kill the man if he continued threatening the well-being of their small group. While he could easily do it, he preferred if he didn't have to kill anyone at all. The only way to prevent that was if their group separated. Given the status of the school, the city was bound to be even worse. Unless there was a safe place they could rest for the night. He didn't want to take the chance of leaving the bus, nor did he want to condemn the students following Shido to their deaths. "So, what are you guys gonna do?" "I want to come too," Shizuka said as she applied the brakes to the bus and stood up. "You do?" said Saya, surprised at the admission. "Well, both of my parents are dead and my relatives live far away. It's rude of me to say this, but I don't like Shido-sensei." At that, all of them laughed except for Naruto. He was too deep in his thoughts on how to avoid any unnecessary loss of life. "Then what shall we do? This area of town is foreign to me," Siko said, seriously breaking the jovial atmosphere. "Well, my parents' estate is in the same area as Komoro's. Knowing them, they're probably fortifying it. We can go there and try to find information on everyone's family's whereabouts," answered Saya. "If we can't make it across the bridge today, we can stay at my friend's house. It's not that far away and it's gated off. She also has a tank for a car," piped Shizuka, more than ready to leave the bus. "It'd be nice to have a place to rest, don't you think so, Takashi?" Rei said, joining in on the conversation. "It sounds safe enough, though getting there might be a problem," Takashi said seriously, earning nods from everyone. Shido turned to look towards the front of the bus. Everyone up there was speaking to each other in a low tone, so he couldn't hear their conversation. Shido narrowed his beady yellow eyes as he saw this. They were plotting something. "What's wrong, you guys? We should be working together," he said to them. "Why would we want to work with you? You heard what Uzumaki-san said. You kicked a student in the face to escape from the dead," Siko responded while glaring at the shady man. All she got was a shrug from the man. "It's survival of the fittest. He sprained his ankle. I'm not a strong brute like Uzumaki-kun, so I couldn't carry him," a devious glint in his eyes. "We have our own agenda. Plus, this isn't some school trip. We aren't entitled to stay with you," Saya replied to the man's previous question. This earned looks of hatred from everyone in the back, a dangerous gleam in Shido's eyes. "Oh? If you've decided to leave, then feel free to do so. Japan is the land of the free. Though it would be bad if our medic and fellow teacher left. After all, these students are relying on you," Shido said as he licked his lips towards the end, eyeing both Shizuka and Kushina. This earned disgusted looks from everyone but his cult. Naruto suddenly stood up and glared towards the man. His cerulean eyes pierced right into the man's soul with a look that promised death. "If it's the land of the free, they're more than welcome to leave filth like you. We were also on this bus first, remember? We led you on. When we could have easily left you all for dead. You'll do what we say," Naruto growled out while he glared at Shido's cultists. Taking a shuriken out of his pouch, Naruto threw it at Shido, grazing the man's cheek. The man took a step back and cowered in fear. If you think of hurting anyone in this group, I won't hesitate to end your life. We're leaving, grab your things everyone. This gained nods from everyone in the group. Kakashi picked up one of the 3 duffel bags filled with goods and hoisted it on his back. Naruto followed suit with the other bags. Siko and Rei exited the bus first, followed by Saya, Shizuka, and Kushina. I'll cover the rear, Uzumaki-san, said Hirano as he pointed his improvised gun at Shido, making sure the man or his followers wouldn't do anything drastic. Naruto nodded at him, and they both exited the bus. Everyone had begun running up the overpass, leaving the bus and a fuming Shido. 5 hours later. Maybe we should have stayed on the bus, Shizuka said as the group ran at a pace. They still had quite the distance to cover. The bridge they had planned on crossing was crawling with the dead. While Naruto could ferry them across the stream, nightfall was approaching. Plus the gunshots and screams of fear had been much. The boundaries set by the police had all been overrun more than likely. How much further is your friend's apartment, Shizuka-sensei? Huffed Saya. They'd been on the move for hours and the fatigue was finally starting to set in. They only had an hour before dusk. It's walking distance from here, Shizuka said as they all slowed down. Kakashi and Naruto both worked up quite the sweat carrying the goods they took from the gas station. "Ah, ma, there it is!" Shizuka shouted as she pointed towards the apartment. Just outside the apartment was the car Shizuka described. "A Humvee. What kind of friend do you have, Shizuka-sensei?" Hirano said, flabbergasted. "They won't be able to get over the fence. We should be able to sleep here safely for the night," added Rei as she looked at the 8-foot-high wall surrounding the complex. A gust of cool air blew past them as they all gazed at the complex. It would be nice to sleep on a bed for the night. Hearing groans and noise coming from inside, they all narrowed their eyes. The residents inside had all been turned and had begun lumbering towards them. Naruto and Kakashi set their duffel bags on the ground as both of them readied their weapons. "Let's clear the entire complex so we can rest safely," Siko said as she too readied herself. Pushing open the gate, Naruto thrust his kunai into the skull of one of the dead closest to the gate. Kakashi delivered a crushing blow to the skull of another. Hirano remained by the bags with the other 3 to defend them as Rei and Siko joined in. In but a few moments the entrance to the building was clear of the dead. "Let's move everything inside and shut the gate. Even though the noise should have drawn all of them, we should still clear all of the rooms in pairs just to be safe," Naruto suggested. "I'll go with Rei," Kakashi said with a shrug. He looked towards Rei and the brunette gave him a nod. The duo then moved into the building. "Well, that leaves us then," Naruto said to Siko as he turned to Hirano. "Yell if anything happens," Naruto told Hirano and the rest of the group. Naruto and Siko ran into the building and ran up to the 2nd floor. Naruto kicked open the door and went into the room. It was a rather quaint apartment, just the essentials packed into one room and a bathroom. Siko kicked the door to the bathroom. Inside was 2 of them and blood everywhere. She quickly dispatched of the 2 with quick blows to their heads. After around 30 minutes, all 4 of them had come out of the apartment building. Everyone was covered in grime and blood as they waved over to Hirano and the others to join them inside. The door to the maisonette was still locked and had no signs of forced entry. "Lead the way, Shizuka-sensei," Naruto said as he walked over to the duffel bags, reaching down to grab 2 of the 3 bags, only to have one of them snatched away from him. Kushina snatched the bag away from him and stuck her tongue out playfully at him. At least it was the bag with medical supplies, considerably lighter than the one he was carrying. Hefting it onto his back, he followed the group inside after making sure the gate was secure. Location: Tokunosu, Japan. Time 12:45 p.m. Kushina was in absolute bliss as hot water flowed through her crimson hair and down her body, washing away all the filth she had accumulated throughout the last 2 days. Lathering her hair with some more shampoo, she rinsed it once again and sighed happily. They'd been inside the maisonette for an hour or so now. After making sure it was safe and none of them were inside, they'd all deemed that using this moment of respite to clean up was of the highest priority. while the boys including her son were keeping watch. The longer they baited, Kushina had begun to worry that they were making too much noise, though she quickly dismissed that worry as soon as she heard the sirens and shouting from outside. It had been 2 days since the outbreak, 2 days since the world had gone straight to hell. Yet here she was taking a bath with a couple of her students and a coworker. Yeah, nothing would ever be the same again. Making sure to rinse her hair completely, she stood up and walked towards the bathtub that was currently occupied by Shizuka and Rei. Rei was being very grabby as she practically mauled at Shizuka's larger priests. Moving past the duo, she sank into the tub of hot water and hugged her knees against her sizable chest to make room. She laid in the hot water, her thoughts drifting to her blonde son. If it wasn't for him, there wasn't a doubt in her mind that she would have never made it out of the school. She noticed it months ago, ever since that damned fever he had. Naruto was different now. She'd be a failure as a parent if she didn't notice a change in her child. Naruto had gone to a couple of different dojos all around the area they lived in, and she joined him in some of the training. She didn't even recognize his fighting style anymore. It wasn't just that either. His otherworldly abilities were unexplainable. She'd never seen anything like it. He was even having frequent nightmares, where he'd call out the names of people she never heard of from him. Niji, Hinata, and Tsunade were only but a few. When he woke from the nightmare, he'd have such a haunted look on his face, like he'd lost something important to him. It had gotten so bad that they went to the doctors to get medicine for him to have sleepless dreams. She needed to have a conversation with him. She planned on having one with him 2 days ago before the outbreak started, when he had called out her name and thrown open the door to her classroom, covered in blood and other unsightly things. The look in his eyes, like she was the only thing tethering him to this reality. Then he swept her up and took her to safety. A loud erotic moan beside her snapped her out of her thoughts. Looking towards the source of the noise, she sweat dropped. Of course, it was those two. Rei quite literally had her hands full with Shizuka's priests, and was squeezing them. The brunette suddenly pinched the older blonde's fipples, causing her to let out another louder moan. She was in the JSDF in her younger years, so she was used to skinship with other women. But these two were taking it a bit far. It sounds like we're in some weirdo Zoroge game, groaned out Saya, who was rinsing her hair looking at the duo beside her. Why do we all have to take a bath together anyway? She asked to no one in particular. You already know the answer to that, don't you, Takagi-san? Replied Siko as she lathered her body with soap, shutting out the rest of the noise around her. She went back to soaking in the tub of water. She was going to at least until she felt someone's hand snake around her shoulder. You've got some pretty nice ones too, Kushina-sensei, shouted Rei as the brunette attempted to grope her priests. Grabbing both of Rei's hands, Kushina stood up and looked at the brunette, delivering a gentle smack right onto Rei's head. You're going to get a lot worse if you try anything like that again, she said as she cracked her knuckles for some added effect. You can do even worse than that, shouted Rei as she nursed the foaming lump on her head. You can just ask Naruto if you care to try again, she said with a grin. Her student shook her head furiously as she looked at her with fear in her eyes. She nodded her head sagely at the younger woman's choice. That's what I thought, she said as she stepped out of the tub to go back to just rinsing her hair and her body. She wanted to just get away from Rei for now. Naruto Uzumaki. Location, Tokunosu, Japan. Present time. Naruto just laid back on the bed as he spun a shuriken on his finger. He was getting pretty bored. With the entrance to their compound barred and the high walls around them, they didn't really have to worry about them unless they learned how to climb. Even more erotic moans reverberated throughout the maisonette. Just what are they doing in there? Was his first thought as he restrained himself from going to take a peek. Seeing Jiraiya get the ever-living shit beat out of him taught him to never peek on women. Sounds like they're having a great time, said Takashi with a blush on his face. Want to see if they need some protection from them in there? Asked Hirano as the two of them tried to pry open the safe again. Takashi looked like he was entertaining the idea. You're much older than you look, Hirano, he said as he threw the shuriken right between the two. Both of his classmates yelped in surprise as they both fell backward. I don't want to die quite yet, Koda, said Takashi as the black-haired teen looked at him in fear. On second thought, peeking on them sounds like a terrible idea, agreed Kota. Naruto just let out a sigh as he looked away from the two. His mind was running rampant now. It didn't take a genius to realize that all of the women in the bathroom were extremely well endowed, having been the apprentice for one of the most perverted men in all of the elemental nations. He couldn't help but develop a very healthy appreciation for the female body. A blush formed on his face as he pictured all of the women in there, including his mother. Palming his face, Naruto blew some more air out of his nose. What kind of son has such depraved thoughts of their own mother? Incest wasn't irregular in the elemental nations, though marriage or a union between a parent and their child was extremely rare, only happening if a clan was at its dying embers. Shaking his head to rid himself of such thoughts, he turned his attention to his classmates who were trying to force the safe open again. You two need help with that? They'd been trying to pry it open for the last 10 minutes. The previous one hadn't even put up half as much resistance as this one was. The first safe contained ammunition for various firearms. Sure, why not? Said Kota as he handed him the crowbar. The chubby boy seemed more than eager for a break. Setting the crowbar into place, bracing his body and pushing forwards, Naruto cracked open the safe with ease. Looking towards the two who were resting on the bed, they were both staring at him with blank stares. We weakened it for you, Takashi deadpanned as Kota nodded in approval. If it helped stitch together whatever pride they have left, it was fine with him. The two got off the bed as he turned to look at what was actually inside the safe. Like Hirano had said, there were definitely guns if there was ammo, though he had no clue what they were actually called. Some of them had looked pretty similar to the props he'd seen in movies with his mother. Hirano let out a gasp from behind him and moved faster than he ever expected the larger boy could move, though he ran straight into his leg and was looking up at him with a pained look. Are you made out of steel or something? Nope, just 100% muscle, he replied with a grin. Stepping out of the way, Hirano was practically foaming at the mouth as he inspected the weapons before him. Whatever they were, they must have been pretty rare for this kind of reaction. At least he thought so. Hirano had leapt to his feet and was examining a rifle with quite the mad glint in his eyes. Hirano soon began babbling on about the rifle. He didn't understand much of what the plump boy was saying at all. He was completely oblivious to firearms. He never held one or seen one in person until now. These other two look like they belong in some action film, he said as he pointed at the remaining rifles in the safe. Hirano immediately put down the rifle he had in his hands and snatched up the rifle in the safe. Hirano was practically drooling at this point. He began spouting stuff about the rifle being illegal and such. You're pretty well informed about these kind of things, aren't you, Hirano? He said with a bittersweet smile as he was reminded of Tenten. You kinda remind me of one of my friends. At the mention of one of his friends, he apparently caught the attention of his two classmates. Were they anyone we knew? You hardly talked in any of the classes, said Takashi with a surprised look. No, either of you would know her. She wasn't from around here. He sat back down on the bed and shook his head to rid himself of thinking of his past life in the elemental nations. He needed to live in the here and now. He finally had the mother he wanted so badly during his youth, and there wasn't a single thing he wouldn't do to protect her. Did you want to use any of the guns, Naruto? Asked Hirano as he gestured towards the two rifles and shotgun. And make an embarrassment of myself? I think I'll just stick to these, he said as he spun a kunai on his hand. Who even taught you how to fight like that? None of the martial artists around here even use anything similar to those, said Takashi pointing at his kunai. Someone's a lot more perceptive than they let on, he thought as he looked at Takashi. Some of my senseis taught me the basics and I made my own, he replied with a shrug. It wasn't a complete lie. He hated lying, but who would believe him if he told them his story? They'd all think he was a lunatic. He knew he couldn't continue lying to all of them. Most of them were more occupied with their current situation rather than finding out about him, though he was sure they suspected he wasn't exactly normal. His mother, for one, already suspected something. She had been with him the longest out of anyone here, and keeping secrets from her was the last thing he wanted to do. He just didn't know how he'd break it to her. "Hey, Ka-chan. I'm your son, but my mind was transferred here from a different dimension. It sounds crazy, right? There we were all able to use all sorts of special abilities with this thing called Chakra. Yeah, you were there with me. You died a little bit after you gave birth to me when you helped seal a demon into me, and I was left all alone in a village full of people who despised me," he thought, and this time he couldn't keep the grimace off of his face. He'd sound like he belonged in a mental ward. "I'm going downstairs to get a drink," he said as Takashi and Hirano began loading magazines. Before he got to the door, he looked back at the two. "Those things are loud, right?" "Oh, you bet your ass they are," answered Hirano with a grin. If noise attracted those things, he'd want to use them as a last resort. His physical strength wasn't anything to scoff at. Couple that with chakra and he was probably stronger than most things on the planet. He didn't have a problem fighting in close range, but the others didn't have that luxury. "Try to use them as a last resort if you don't mind. I want to keep this place safe just in case we run into trouble in the future," he said as the other two nodded before he exited the room. As soon as he shut the door behind him, he was greeted with a sight that would leave most men weak in the knees. In front of him was a woman with friezes that could rival Tsunade's. They were practically on display for him, since the only thing protecting what little modesty she had left was a towel. "Naruto-kun," slurred out Shizuka as she pecked him on the cheek. "You're drunk," he deadpanned as he smelled the alcohol on her breath. "The world is ending and you're getting drunk," he said as he palmed his face in exasperation. "Just a bit," said Shizuka as she pouted at him. She grinned suddenly as she took his arm and smothered it between her ample bosom. He felt his cheeks light up at the sudden contact. His pants felt way too tight at the moment as he shifted around. The grin on Shizuka's face became even more devious as her eyes found their way to his groin. "Oh my," said Shizuka with a sultry tone as she reached down to take hold of it. "You're going to need to sleep this off," he said as he took hold of her hands and took a deep, calming breath. "But I don't wanna. It's dark and scary outside, plus it's filled with monsters," shouted Shizuka childishly. He sighed as she stared at him. "I'll protect you from all the monsters outside if you do," he offered. "Will you help me sleep, Naruto-kun?" said Shizuka with that damned grin. She pushed her frieze together on his arm as she let out a soft moan. With a considerable amount of willpower, he gently removed his arm from the two warm pillows. He didn't give her a chance to say anything as he hefted her onto his back. Shizuka's pillowy melons pressed into his back as she let out a gasp of surprise. Whether it was from her being drunk or doing it on purpose, she began shifted around. As awkward and hormone-inducing as the situation was, he didn't want her to fall off of his back and hurt herself. So he reached behind and grabbed hold of whatever he could. The throaty moan in his ear caused a certain appendage of his to throb painfully. "Aren't you just a little pervert, Naruto-kun? If you'd asked, I would have let you do whatever you wanted to me," whispered Shizuka into his ear. He could feel Shizuka rubbing her frieze into his back and her hot breath on his neck. The sound of someone coming up the stairs made Shizuka stop. "Please don't be Ka-chan," thought Naruto tearfully. He waited with bated breath as the person climbed up the steps. If it was his mother, there wasn't any doubt in his mind she'd probably kill him. Had let out a sigh of relief when he saw that it was only Rei. She at least had some clothing on, compared to Shizuka at least. "Oh, it's you. Do you know where I can find Takashi?" said Rei with a slight slur as she stumbled towards him. "Please don't tell me you're drunk too," he said with a sweat drop. Rei just looked at him strangely and let out a giggle. "He's in there," he informed her by gesturing to the door behind him as his hands were rather full. Wordlessly, he moved past Rei and with some care stepped down the stairs. As soon as he reached the bottom of the stairs, a chill went down his spine. Every instinct he had was screaming that he was in danger, and only one thing in this world was possible of that. "Naruto Uzumaki, there better be a good reason as to why you're carrying her like that," said his irate mother Kushina. He slowly turned his head to look at his mother as a bead of sweat went down his face. She looked angry and disappointed. "And now Ka-chan. This isn't what it looks like," he said as Kushina cracked her knuckles. Oh, this is definitely what it looks like. You should have been there, Kushina-chan. He swept me off of my feet and began touching me all over, said Shizuka dramatically as she began feeling up his chest. Yeah, like he'd grope an old head like you, said Kushina dismissively. I didn't raise you to be a pervert, Naruto, so go drop that blonde hag on the couch already. My, Kushina-chan. If I didn't know any better, you sound jealous. Do you want your Naruto to do this to you? I don't mind sharing, said Shizuka with a grin like a Cheshire cat. Why you? Sputtered Kushina with a blush as she looked at the snoring blonde on his back. He quickly moved to the nearby couches. Saya was there already asleep, setting Shizuka gently on the unused couch. He covered her with a blanket that was nearby and turned to his mother. Now she was quite the sight to behold. Like the others, she didn't have much to wear. She was clad in only a sports bra that did little to hide her bountiful frieze, and a pair of shorts that hugged her legs, showing off her wide hips, creamy white thighs, and mouth-watering ass. Her gorgeous red hair was tied up into a ponytail. He recalled reading something in a library about the Uzumakis having otherworldly beauty. Looking at his goddess of a mother before him, he was inclined to agree. The sound of Kushina clearing her throat and the blush on her face made him realize he'd been staring for quite some time now. Sorry, he muttered as he averted his gaze. It's fine. I'm flattered that you find someone as old as me something to stare at, murmured Kushina with her blush still in place. You do know you're the most beautiful woman I know, right? Said Naruto with a frown as he looked at his mother. And you're delusional if you think you're some ugly old hag. His mother just stared at him. She seemed to be contemplating over his words. He really had no fucking clue what possessed his father in this dimension to cheat on her. That was the likely cause of her lack of confidence in her looks. As I said before, you're the prettiest woman I know. Not with just your looks either. You're kind, caring, harsh when you need to be, and the most loving person I know. There isn't a single thing about you that's ugly, he said with a soft smile. Kushina was still staring at him as she clutched a hand up to her chest. She looked torn on whether she wanted to believe him or not. Walking right up to her, he wrapped his arms around her and embraced her. Thank you, she finally said as she rested her head on his chest. Anytime, he said as he pulled away from their embrace. Kushina let out a cute sneeze as a gust of cold air washed over them. I'll go grab my jacket for you. He practically flew up the stairs, leaving his mother all alone. Idiot, he thought as he stopped halfway up the steps. He was just trying to get her to regain some of her confidence, but he ended up blurting out all of that. He heard someone arguing just up the staircase a bit, and raised an eyebrow. Climbing a couple more steps, he came across both Rei and Takashi. The two of them looked like they had just finished. Rei was looking rather sad and Takashi had quite a determined look. Strange. He coughed into his hand to let the two of them know he was there. I won't presume to know what either of you were talking about. Just go easy on each other. We don't if we have anyone else at this point, he said as Rei and Takashi looked at him with wide eyes. Being a shinobi made you appreciate life. Every day could have been your last. It was a simple fact of life, so you learned to appreciate every day and the time you had with those close to you. He walked past the two, leaving them to each other and their thoughts. Slipping into the room, he grabbed his coat. He spotted Hirano keeping watch through one of the windows. At least someone was doing something productive. Leaving the room, he decided to jump over the railing. It'd be pretty awkward if he walked past those two, especially since it looked like they were having a moment together. Landing on the ground softly, the smell of food being cooked reached his nose. His mother's voice along with Siko's were coming from the kitchen, so he walked over. Hey, what are your cookie dash dot? He began before he paused halfway as he was greeted with yet another sight that he burned into his memory. Siko and his mother were facing away from him with their asses in full view. Siko was clad only in an apron and a thong. His mother was still in her boxers with her crimson hair hanging just above her shapely rear. Kushina had that mature look that was quickly becoming one of his favorite things in a woman. Not to discredit Siko though, her lithe body was quite attractive as well, paired with her long legs and toned body. At the sound of his voice, both of them turned around to see him. He already knew he was blushing, and it didn't take a genius to know why. Siko took it in stride, only giggling lightly, while his mother blushed up a storm and refused to look at him. "How are you feeling, Naruto-san? You look feverish," said Siko with a coy smile and a glint in her eyes. "Why yeah, it is getting a little hot in here," replied a flustered Naruto as he rubbed the back of his head. His mother was focusing on what the two of them were cooking, managing to tear his eyes away from the two beautiful women in front of him. Naruto walked behind his mother and put his jacket around her. "Thank you," murmured Kushina, who still wasn't looking at Naruto. Naruto just moved past her and walked towards the fridge, intent on doing something to keep him from openly ogling Kushina and Siko. As Naruto tried to enjoy his drink in peace, a series of gunshots from outside stopped him in his tracks. "Those gunshots are getting closer," said Kushina with a frown. "Is it that bad out there?" she said, looking towards him for the first time in 10 minutes. "I'm not entirely sure. I don't think the people on the bridge will make it past the night," he answered with a grim look on his face. "Though as long as we stay here together, we'll be fine. I'll make sure of that." Hearing multiple gunshots ring out in the distance, followed by even more screaming, Naruto groaned. "I guess it's pretty fucking bad then if they decided to start shooting," he murmured with a frown. "Watch your language, Naruto," shouted Kushina as she whacked him upside the head. "Hell's breaking loose outside, and you're worried about me cussing?" he shouted back comically as he rubbed the side of his head. Though looking back at it, maybe he shouldn't have shouted at her. Kushina was giving him that smile. The smile every son knew and feared across the world. "I don't care what's going on in the world," Kushina began with a sickly sweet smile. "I won't have my son grow up to be some foul-mouthed idiot. Got it?" "Yes, ma'am," he replied instantly while nodding. Siko was just looking at the two of them while laughing softly. When Kushina wasn't looking, the purple-haired teen imitated a whip at him. She didn't get it. Mothers were terrifying, but Kushina Uzumaki was something entirely different. She was known as the red-hot habanero for a reason. "I'll go check up on them up there. Would you watch this for me, Kushina-sensei?" asked Siko as she straightened out her apron. Hirano was probably going to die of blood loss just from seeing her. "Yeah, Naruto, and I have it down here," Kushina replied while she went back to stirring the pot of vegetables. As Siko rushed up the stairs, Naruto leaned back into his chair and stared at the ceiling. It was just him and Kushina, alone in the kitchen now, and he'd rather not make it awkward by ogling her. "Naruto," Kushina said, gaining his attention as he turned to look at her. She moved the vegetables off of the heat and looked right at him. Whatever she was about to say was important with the serious look she had on her face. "You're going to answer every question I ask, and you better not lie." "Fire away," he sighed out, rubbing the back of his head. He saw this coming a mile away. Kushina was quiet for a moment as she looked him in the eyes. "You're just so much more different than you were months ago. I see it in your eyes. You had the same eyes some of the people in the JSDF did after some of our deployments," she began as she moved a chair beside him and sat down. "Don't get me started on how you fight. I've never seen a martial artist that's better than you. I just want to know what's changed my baby boy so much. And whatever your answer is, just know that I'll always love you and believe you," continued Kushina, taking his hand into hers. Naruto took a deep breath before he looked into Kushina's captivating violet eyes. How could he not tell her the truth after she said something like that? "Well, it's kind of a long story," he said, rubbing the back of his head with his free hand. "We've got a lot of free time, why no?" replied Kushina with a giggle. "Well, dash." As he was about to tell her about everything, gunshots from upstairs interrupted him. Hearing people rushing down the stairs, Naruto jolted up from his seat with a kunai in hand. Takashi, Rei, and Siko were all rushing down the stairs. "What happened?" he asked sternly. He hoped there was a good reason they just gave away their location. "There's a little kid and her mother out there. I'm sorry, but we couldn't just sit back and watch this time," said Takashi with a determined face. "Well, what are you waiting for? There are a girl and her mother who need saving," he said, gaining a smile from his classmate. "I'll get everyone ready to leave." said Siko, who went to wake up the sleeping members of their group. I don't think we'll need to, but that's a good backup plan, he said as everyone looked at him with a confused expression. Aren't they attracted to noise? Said Ray with a dumbstruck look. Yeah, there's already at least 100 of them out there, Takashi said, nodding at Ray as they ran through the door to the hallway. He was about to follow them until Kushina stopped him with a firm hand around his wrist. We'll talk later when you're more comfortable about it. Just be careful, okay? I don't know what I'll do if something bad happens to you, whispered Kushina with a frightful expression. I'll just have to make sure nothing happens to me then, right? He replied with a smile. The look on Kushina's face told him he wasn't convincing anyone. You're way too precious to me to leave and all alone. Just know that no matter what happens, I'll always come back, come hell or high water, he said in a much softer tone as he hugged his mother tightly. That was the promise of a lifetime. With that, Naruto kissed Kushina on the forehead and went out the door, missing what Kushina had said to no one but herself. You have to know what you're doing to me, you idiot, said Kushina to herself, clutching a hand to her chest over her heart. Outside. Being outside was about as good as one could think. The air was heavy with smoke, the scent of blood, and the smell of gunpowder. It didn't bother Naruto that much. Compared to the force Shinobi wore, this was child's play. Though he wouldn't underestimate these things simply because he fought in a bloody conflict. Underestimating your foes was how you died quickly. And in this case, with all the shooting, there were plenty of them standing in front of their gate. Wind style, great breakthrough, whispered Naruto as he channeled the bare minimum of chakra into the jutsu. Blowing off the gate to a potential safe house was one of the last things he wanted to do. The mass of dead flew back despite the jutsu being slightly underpowered. Deciding to warm up on his taijutsu, Naruto leapt over the fence. With his chakra enhancing his strength and resilience, it didn't take longer than 30 seconds. Turning to look down the road, when Takashi said at least 100, he was right. There were even more of the dead pouring in through the back alleys and smaller roads. Cracking his neck, he felt a grin form on his face as the rush of battle filled his senses. The chakra in his body felt purified, and in turn, he felt great. Fire style, great fireball. The orange ball of fire traveled all the way down the street, leaving nothing but ashes. That was anticlimactic, he said to himself as he stared down the empty street. Hearing the sound of the girl crying, he rushed down the street at breakneck speed. Arriving at the scene, Naruto narrowed his eyes. The woman lying on the ground was fading fast, thanks to the knife in her gut. Unless something was done, she'd be gone in the next minute or two. Rushing over the bodies, Naruto sat down by the maroon-haired woman. Her daughter was still crying right beside her. Despite her current situation, the woman looked alarmed at his presence as she tried to sit up. I'm here to help, he tried to assure the woman who was looking at him with skeptical purple eyes. He never got a response as the woman fainted. Mama! Shouted the young pink-haired girl at the woman's side. Rushing over, Naruto tore away part of the woman's shirt to get a better look at the wound. He began to apply pressure around the stab wound. Though he doubted it was going to save this woman, she had already lost so much blood. He wasn't a medical ninja, but months before his battle with Madara, Sakura had taught him what she could. The mystical palm technique. Back then he had way too much chakra to actually use it properly, or even train with it. His reserves were much smaller now, and it was the only thing he could think of that could possibly save the woman. He had too as he saw the young girl by the woman's side. Kemi knows where the young girl's father was, and now her mother was dying. She was going to be an orphan. Those deep dark memories of his youth suddenly came rushing back to him. The loneliness, the bullying, always wanting attention. Wanting your parents to be there. With determination brewing in his eyes, Naruto focused as he summoned the technique. Pulling out the kitchen knife with his free hand, Naruto held his hand over the gushing wound. The light green aura surrounding his hand glowed brightly as the woman's injury first stopped bleeding then sealed. Is Mama going to be okay? Asked the young girl who was looking at him with watery eyes. Yeah, your mama's going to be okay, he answered with a relieved smile. The woman was hanging on by just a thread. Let's take her back to my friends. One of them is pretty good at taking care of people," he said as he moved to pick up the unconscious woman. "Can she take care of Mama like you did?" Your hand glowed green, and Mama got better. "You're like a superhero Oni-chan," said the girl with a big smile. Hearing what sounded like a motorbike hauling ass down the street, Naruto turned and looked at the young girl. "Oni-chan will tell you what he is later, but for now, let's just keep this a secret between you and me, okay?" he said with a grin. Lifting the unconscious woman, he began walking down the street with the girl clutching at his leg. The street was clear of them, thanks to his fireball. But there were probably still some of them lurking around in the alleys nearby. He spotted Takashi and Ray huffing and puffing as they stopped in front of him and the girl. "Great, you can walk us back," he said with a shit-eating grin. All he got was a groan from Takashi as Ray ignored him as she was busy glomping the adorable young girl. "She's so cute," squealed Ray as she hugged the girl. Naruto tuned out everything as they walked back towards the apartment complex. The walk back was quiet except for Ray and the now named Alice talking to each other. The commotion at the bridge could still be heard in the distance, but everything around them just seemed off. The feeling of someone's or something's eyes lingering on him got the hairs on the back of his neck to stand up. The gate to their complex came into sight as Siko opened it for them. Everyone was there with different bags on their backs ready to leave. Shizuka stepped forward to take the wounded woman from him, and with the help of Siko, they went inside. "Thank goodness you're all right. I was about to come to get you," said Kushina with a relieved smile as she slung the rifle around her shoulder. "You worry too much, Kaa-chan, but I still love you all the same," he said, returning Kushina's smile. Though the mood was ruined when blood-curdling screams erupted from down the street. The screams died down in seconds as he spotted something on the rooftops. It was pale and looked grotesque. And it was giving him a smile that sent a chill up his spine. He could feel the bloodlust radiating from it as it dashed into the shadows. Then came the killing intent, something he never expected or thought any being in this world besides animals were capable of. Everyone but he and Kushina were affected by it as she shouldered her rifle, and he took out his kunai. "All of you get into the house now," he commanded as he caught another glimpse of the creature in the dark. Hearing a shriek, he jumped in front of Kushina, catching the pale monstrosity by the throat and slammed it into the pavement. He could see why the people down the street screamed bloody murder. Whatever it was once human, he could tell that much. "What is it?" asked Kushina as she nudged the dead body with the barrel of her rifle. "I'm not sure, but I'd rather not stay to figure out. Let's get inside," he said worriedly. He hoped more of those things wouldn't turn up later in the future. Cold water dripped onto Naruto's face as he let out a groan. His eyes opened to find the familiar surrounding of his mindscape, a place he never expected to find himself in again. From what he could tell, everything was still the same. Except for one thing, Kurama was still missing. Standing up off the ground, Naruto looked at his reflection in the water and saw that he was wearing his clothing from the Fourth Great War. He didn't miss wearing these clothes at all. They reminded him that he failed to beat Madara and save his friends. Not that he needed any reminder of that. With Kurama gone and Naruto still being in perfect condition, Naruto found himself wondering as to why he was here. Unless tailed beasts could traverse universes with their hosts, which obviously didn't happen. So that begged the question as to why he was here. "I never expected our mine to be a sewer." Guess that answered it. Naruto turned around and came face to face with, well, himself. Though, they were wearing casual clothing from Japan. "Would you believe me if I told you this was because I had a massive fox demon sealed into me as a child?" Naruto asked Naruto too. "Oh, I know all about it. I've been looking through your memories," Naruto too said as he sat down on a stool. "How'd you do that?" "How'd I do what?" Naruto just facepalmed before he let out a sigh. Was this what people meant when they told me I was annoying? Hearing his own laughter made it even worse. "It's our mind, so I figured I could summon a chair or something to sit on. As it turns out, I was right," Naruto too said as a chair appeared behind Naruto. Naruto sat down on the stool as he stared at Naruto too. Naruto found this all somewhat strange. The person sitting across from him was him, but he wasn't. He had fought in a war while Naruto too was just a regular teenager in Japan. So, you've got the hots for Ka-san, huh? Naruto too asked with a blank face. Well, mine died a couple of hours after I was born, so I've never really had one. Also, could you really blame me? Naruto said as he shrugged his shoulders. Coming from a world where incest was a common practice probably swayed his mindset in that regard. Incest, along with other things that were normal in the elemental nations, were entirely taboo in Japan and all over the world. It didn't surprise him in the least that Naruto too found him weird. Everyone deserves to be happy, even if incest is strange. I don't really care, as long as you make Ka-san happy. You both deserve to be happy, Naruto too said with a dull voice as he crossed his fingers. Do you really think that, or are you just saying it? Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow. Yeah, after Ka-san found out that Tu-san had cheated on her, everybody could tell she lost a lot of her bravado. It didn't help that it happened when I was still relatively young, so I didn't really know how to react to any of it at the time. I just ended up distancing myself from her and Tu-san, Naruto too said with a downcast expression. Naruto didn't really know how to react or what to say. He didn't really know how to deal with emotions in general. At the very least, you're making her happy. I tried to be more upbeat and appreciative of her as I got older, but I could only do so much. I haven't seen her smile like that in years, Naruto too said as a smile came onto his face. I've had to put on a mask for most of my life. So when I woke up here and saw her again, it was one of the few times that I've genuinely been happy, Naruto said with a smile as he recalled recent fond memories. After Kushina had faded away when she helped him master the Kyuubi's chakra, it had left him more sad than happy, to be honest. Just experiencing a mother's love for the first time was a joy. To know that it was the last time he'd encounter something like that ever again, it left him feeling empty inside. Though now that Naruto was here in his mindscape with this universe's Naruto, that brought forth some questions he wanted to ask. So, what are we going to do now? Do you want your body back or something? Naruto asked somewhat apprehensively. Naruto didn't know what he would do or what would happen if Naruto too decided he wanted to take his body back. When he had come to after that fever, he definitely knew that this body was weaker. So he had trained constantly every day just to get back to his previous strength. Thankfully he did. With everything going on having, his strength and chakra helped out a ton. I don't think either of us would want that. Especially with everything going on, Naruto too said, shaking his head. You're much better suited for all of this than I am. A relieved sigh left Naruto as all the tension left his shoulders. If Naruto too had asked for his body back, he probably would have refused. There wasn't any malicious intent behind his refusal. He only wanted to protect the few people he cared about. It was nice to talk to you about this, but I don't know how much time we have left. I've been trying to talk to you all this time. Naruto too began with a solemn tone. The main reason I brought you here was to talk about Ka-san. We both know she's a little crazy, but she'd probably have more than a couple of issues if you told her you were her son from another universe. Naruto slumped back into his chair as he thought about what Naruto too had just said. He knew there were going to be issues when he told Kushina about what had occurred. Hell, even she knew that he had changed a ton. With what Naruto too had told him, it was a super blatant change. One she had welcomed with open arms, but it was a change nonetheless. Hence why I thought we could meld together as one, memories and everything, Naruto too declared. After coming to from the fever, his memories regarding Naruto too's early life had been foggy. Everything else was as clear as day. Thankfully, he had managed to piece most of it together. Though, having Naruto too's memories would probably help him. What would happen to you? Naruto asked, somewhat surprised. He didn't express Naruto too to do something like this. Who knows? Naruto too said, shrugging his shoulders. I had my chance to take care of Ka-san, to be there for her. I failed. You, on the other hand, haven't. You've made her happy, and I want you to keep doing that. Regardless of what happens to me, Naruto too said with a smile. Even more, memories began flooding his mind as Naruto too began to slowly vanish in front of him. He suddenly felt like he was being pulled out of his mindscape, and Naruto knew he was waking up. He wanted to say something, to thank Naruto too for doing this. Just as he opened his mouth to do so, though, everything went black. Rays of warm sunlight were peering through the masonette's blind as Naruto's eyes snapped open. His head was pounding as it tried to make sense of all the new information racking his brain. It hurt to keep his eyes open, but he managed. Leaning up, Naruto covered his eyes to keep the sun from agitating him even further. Looking around, he saw that everyone was sprawled out all around the living room, still asleep. After the fiasco that was last night, they had all slept in the same room, away from the windows. Thankfully, nothing happened after they went to sleep. The two newest arrivals from last night were both fast asleep on one of the couches. Shizuka was asleep just beside them on the floor. She had probably spent most of the night watching over the unconscious maroon-haired woman. Thankfully, both she and her daughter seemed to be doing fine. Seeing that everyone seemed safe and sound, Naruto ran a hand through his blonde hair. Grime from 3 days of constant moving and fighting covered his hair. He'd probably gone longer without a shower, but that didn't mean he didn't want one. A nice long hot shower sounded absolutely fantastic to him right now. Just as he went to get up from where he had been resting, Naruto stopped himself when he felt an arm wrap around his waist. Looking down beside him, Naruto saw his mother let out a soft groan as her eyes fluttered open. She'd always been an early riser, something she had passed down or beat into him. "Good morning, sleepy," Naruto greeted as he smiled down at his mother. Kushina's long, red tresses were splayed all over her face. She let out a cute yawn as she stretched. Those tired violet eyes were looking up at him as she smiled back. "Good morning, handsome," Kushina said with a tired voice as she rubbed one of her eyes. It was both a blessing and a curse having someone as beautiful as her as his mother. Just a couple of hours ago, after things had calmed down from the rescue, Naruto had to educate both Takashi and Koda when they decided to leer at Kushina. Yeah, he roughed them up a little bit, nothing too serious, but he had to make sure he got the message across. Only he got to look at her like that. As Naruto too had said, he had the hots for her, and there wasn't any point in denying it any longer. Though, that didn't mean he'd just sit around and let anyone leer at her. Takashi and Koda got off easy. Other people wouldn't. A sigh escaped Naruto as he tore his gaze away from Kushina. Here he was already getting possessive. He had never been raised with the social stigma of incest being weird or it being outright outlawed. Clans had practiced it forever in the elemental nations. Not that he cared about social stigmas. Before his abrupt arrival here, his entire life had been a social stigma. People had chastised him for his merely living, not that he cared anymore. Having been transported to a new universe, he'd come to see this as a second chance, a chance to finally experience life with at least one of his parents. Things had never been simple for him. Instead of living a peaceful life, he was battling with the undead roaming the earth, who were tearing people apart. Thankfully, before all of this happened, he had decided to begin training again. Naruto too's body had been in good shape but nothing like he was used to. With the amount of training he had done, it didn't take him very long to get back to what he was used to. With Naruto too's fusion with him, their memories had melded together. He could recall most of Naruto too's early life, all the joys and hardships spent with both of his parents. However, just because he had those memories didn't mean he was then Naruto, their son. God, why did things need to be so complicated? Naruto didn't even know what to think anymore. Every moment he had spent with the firecracker that was his mother was a treasure to him. She had undone what years of loneliness had done to him, and just a mere idea of losing what they had filled him with fear. There were only a few things that scared Naruto Uzumaki. Losing the chance at having Kushina in his life again was at the very top of that list. And right now, despite having those memories, he felt like he'd still lose her. Kushina was already suspecting something was up. She was a hot-headed woman, but she wasn't stupid. Every time they were about to have this dreaded talk, a life or death situation kept interfering. Though, he doubted something as convenient as that was going to happen today. Naruto could feel his frustration rising as he kept thinking about it. This transmigration bullshit was becoming a pain in the ass, but it'd be dying forever. He'd find a way to get through this. If there was one good quality he had, it was perseverance. A soft hand cupping his cheek snapped him out of his thoughts as he focused his gaze on the person responsible. "Hey, I've been saying your name for a couple of minutes now. What's wrong with you?" Kushina asked as a frown marred her beautiful face. "100 things. I'm just thinking about what I should do," Naruto replied after taking a deep breath. His life had never been what was deemed the norm, ranging from both of his parents dying just moments after his birth to a giant fox demon. Now he found himself in a new universe. Fuck, now he could add on the budding feelings he had for his mother in said universe. "You know, you could always talk to me about your problems," Kushina told him with an anxious look on her face. "I know I can. I just doubt you'd believe me," Naruto replied offhandedly. Naruto's eyes widened. He hadn't exactly meant to say that part out loud. A glance at his now sizzling mother was all he could manage. Kushina looked taken aback at what he had said. Those rosy lips of hers were quivering and her violet eyes. Those violet orbs had him frozen when she saw how sad they looked. The expression on her face looked torn between looking sad or angry. "Why would you say something like that?" the upset mother asked as her voice cracked some. Naruto had never felt like such a dick in his life. He'd probably made plenty of people cry. It came with the career he went into. Not that he cared though, there was only enough room in his heart to care about the people he loved. Even so, making his own mother be on the fringes of crying or whooping his ass. He never wanted to slap the shit out of himself more than he wanted to right now. "I'm sorry, Ka-chan. I just don't know how to explain what's going on without sound like a complete lunatic," Naruto said as he rubbed his temples. Besides someone snoring, all Naruto heard from Kushina was her breathing. She didn't say a word, and he was beginning to get worried. When Naruto managed to look at Kushina again, he just saw her staring at him intensely. She still looked a little hurt, but he could tell that she was musing over what he had just said. "People had always told me I was crazy for believing in aliens," Kushina said with a shrug of her shoulders. "But here we are, in the middle of an apocalypse. With some of the shit you've been doing, I probably believe what you told me." Naruto just stared at his seemingly crazy mother for a hot minute before he began laughing. She'd totally believe in aliens and stuff like that. "I guess I'll tell you all about it upstairs in the room with those safes. Let me take a shower first though. I have no clue how you managed to sleep next to me all night," Naruto said as he smelled himself. Kushina just gave Naruto a funny look as she leaned in close to him and sniffed. "I can't say I really noticed it all that much," Kushina mumbled with a cute look. "Though a shower won't hurt. I'll be upstairs." With that, Kushina stood up and began walking to the stairs. Naruto couldn't help but look at the red-headed firecracker that was his mother as she walked away from him. Though, he couldn't help but notice her swaying her hips the entire way. His hormones had been firing off on cylinders last night with all the scantily clad women walking around. Having the woman he fantasized about being with sway her hips in front of him had those hormones come flying back. As if knowing Naruto's eyes were on her, Kushina turned her head and looked him directly in the eyes. There was a dangerous, mischievous look in those violet orbs of hers. Then she winked at him and scampered away up the stairs, leaving Naruto absolutely dumbfounded. How a woman could go from being sad and wanting to beat the shit out of him, to swaying her hips with him knowingly watching? He'd never understand. "A cold shower sounds great," Naruto mumbled to himself. Naruto decided to not spend that much time in the shower, seeing as someone was waiting for him. Though it gave him some extra time to think about the upcoming talk that he had dreaded. It was finally coming, and he didn't really know how to feel right now. Despite his mother's reassurances on believing him, he still felt hesitant. Twisting the shower nozzle off, Naruto quickly dressed in some spare clothing while his outfit was in the wash. Stepping out of the bathroom, Naruto looked at his group. Little to his surprise, everyone was still out cold. Not that he could blame them. For regular people, last night must have been exhausting. Quickly making his way up the stairs, Naruto stood in front of the door of the room his mother was waiting in. Taking in a deep breath, he opened the door and walked inside, making sure to lock the door behind him. Kushina was sitting on the bed, her new rifle at her side as she loaded magazines. She'd shot him a quick smile and patted beside her on the bed. Sitting next to her, Naruto just sat there and watched as she began to examine her rifle in silence. It didn't surprise him in the least when he recalled that she was in the JSDF. She had been the best sniper in all of Japan. So she was quite the badass in both worlds, as far as he knew. After a couple of minutes, Kushina rested her rifle in front of her and looked at him. "Sir," Kushina began as she leaned into him. "What did you have to tell me?" There was a glint in her eyes that he recognized. If he didn't tell her the entire truth, she'd make him regret it. "Well, where do I begin?" Naruto said nervously. Being anxious was something he definitely wasn't used to. How about you start from when you had that bad fever? That's about when I first noticed you start changing," Kushina said with a thoughtful expression. "You noticed I was different all the way back then?" Naruto asked with surprise written all over his face. "You're my son, of course I notice," Kushina explained with a nod of her head. "Women are scary." "Oh, more than you know." Well, he had always been super blunt about things, so why stop now? "As I said earlier, I don't really know how else to explain this. I'm your son, just from another dimension," Naruto said. Yeah, he doubted that would make any sense. If anything, it'd raise more questions than answers. "So if you're my son from a different dimension, what happened to this dimension, Naruto?" Kushina asked with a serious voice. There it was, the question he had been dreading this entire time. "We both became one. All of our memories melded and everything. I don't know. I don't really fully understand it either," Naruto said as he fiddled with his fingers. He really didn't understand most of it. He would admit that he wasn't the brightest person, but he wasn't the dumbest either. "I suppose that would explain all of your weird abilities. It's just so strange to think about. Was Minato your father, and was I still your mother in that universe?" Kushina asked as she bit on her nail. "Yeah, both of you were my parents," Naruto said with a sad smile. "Let me guess, Minato cheated on me there too?" Kushina asked with a bitter look. He couldn't blame her for her resentment. His father had scored on getting a woman like her. Why he would cheat on someone like her boggled his mind. "I wouldn't know. Neither of you were there for me," Naruto answered quietly. As soon as the words left his mouth, he felt Kushina's entire form go rigid as she stared at him, her mouth agape. What do you mean? Did I divorce him and start doing stupid stuff? Was I a failure as a mother? I really need to find out how to go there and beat some sense into the other me databane," Kushina ranted angrily. Naruto just laughed, causing her to look at him strangely. "You didn't do anything stupid like what you're thinking. I'm sure that if you were alive there, you would have been a great mother like you are now," he said as he wiped a tear from his eye. "Oh," Kushina began as her mood suddenly became meek. "Does that mean I died in childbirth or something?" she asked quietly. "No, I'll try to shorten the story as much as possible. You were a Jinchuriki for a beast called the Kyuubi. He was basically a sentient, giant fox that used the same energy as we did that called Chakra. A man who was hellbent on destroying the village we lived in found out about you being pregnant with me at the time. While you were giving birth to me, the Kyuubi was trying to escape the entire time. The man attacked us while you were weak and managed to teleport you away with him. He released the Kyuubi, which destroyed portions of our village before you and Tusan managed to seal him away inside me. Before you managed to seal him away, he tried to kill me. Both you and Tusan threw yourselves in front of me to protect me. I guess evil assholes are in every universe or dimension, huh?" Kushina said with a joking tone before her face turned downcast. "I know it's strange to apologize, but I'm sorry I wasn't there for you, Naruto. I promise to always be here for you, and I'll continue to be that way. Until the day I die." "You don't have to apologize. It wasn't your fault. We're here now, and that's all that matters. I love you, Ka-chan," he said as he wrapped his arms around his mother. "I love you too," Kushina replied as she returned the hug and rested her head against his forehead. When her forehead touched his, Naruto sensed something inside her other than her life force. Something he hadn't felt in her before. Something he hadn't found in anyone else. It was her chakra. Albeit it fell dormant, but it was there as if it was waiting for something. He must have been looking at Kushina rather intently because she started squirming underneath his stare. "What's wrong, Tebane?" Kushina asked with a red face. "Hold still," he said as he held his hand over Kushina's toned stomach and sent a pulse of chakra through her. A surge of chakra flowed through Kushina's chakra system as she stared at him with awe-filled violet eyes. What just happened?" Kushina stuttered as she touched his hand above her stomach. "You've got your chakra back, that's what," Naruto said with a grin. "Does that mean I get to use some of those abilities you're able to use, Databane?" Kushina asked with a goofy smile. "With some training, you'll be able to. I'll help you out with all of it," Naruto said as he gave her a thumbs up. He wasn't going to sit around and be idle like his previous teachers. No, he'd teach her to the best of his ability. Naruto soon found himself staring at the ceiling as his mother glomped him. He couldn't stop himself from laughing when he saw how excited she looked. "Best son ever," Kushina said with a blissful bright smile fixed on her face. "Yeah, zombies might be eating everyone alive, but it wasn't so bad here. Those two seem even closer than usual," Kakashi said as he rubbed his jaw. "They've always been like that. You saw Naruto and her at school," Saya offhandedly remarked as she continued eating her breakfast. Naruto was listening in on the two, even if they tried to be somewhat discreet. Honestly, he didn't really care what anyone thought of him at this point in his life. He had spent too long caring about what others thought. "So, Ms. Genius," he began as he looked at Saya and leaned on the counter in front of her. "What do you think we should do today?" He wasn't really aiming to mock her, that much. From the few times that he had talked to her, she had, of course, come off as an arrogant prick. Though, given their current situation, all he could see was a girl who was afraid. Saya didn't look too pleased with how he spoke to her but answered nonetheless. "We could go to my parents' estate, as I mentioned on the bus. It's just across the river," Saya replied with an attitude as she looked at him. "Everyone good with that?" Naruto asked the group as he looked at them. Everyone in the group nodded in affirmation as Naruto looked at the two newest additions to their group. "What about you two?" Shizuka asked as she looked at the mother and daughter. "We'd like to join you if possible," the maroon-haired woman, Harem if Naruto recalled correctly, said. "You're both more than welcome to," Kushina said with a smile on her face as she smiled at Alice. "Well, we're burning daylight, so let's get a move on," Naruto said as he walked out of the kitchen. He didn't want to be out at nighttime at all, lest they run into more of those pale abominations he killed yesterday. Everyone had packed what they could into the Humvee and piled in. Though, there were 10 of them plus a dog. The Humvee was jam-packed full of them. Several of them had opted to sit on the roof to make the ride at least somewhat comfortable. And so far, things were going well. Naruto hadn't seen a person, living or dead, the entire time, even after they crossed the river. There was an eerie silence, and things looked relatively normal. He had been filtering out most of the conversation between Takashi and Rei. Though, he decided to listen in on the last part. "Hey, Takashi, did you notice?" Rei asked as she held the hand against her head. "Notice what?" Takashi replied awkwardly. "We haven't seen any zombies today," Rei said, causing Naruto to groan. "The calm before the storm," Naruto mumbled as everyone looked at him strangely, except for Kushina. She had been a soldier, so she must have known that a shitstorm was about to happen. "Zombies! Ahead and to the right!" Hirano shouted as Naruto looked at them. God, why did that dumb broad have to say anything? The Humvee lurched to the right suddenly. Naruto wrapped an arm around Kushina as they both laid on the roof of the Humvee, and did their best not to fly off. Shizuka was apparently doing her best to get them to eat the pavement, as she swerved to the left without any warning. Naruto's eyes narrowed when he saw the horde they were driving into. That's when he saw the wires that were fixed onto the walls. Whoever had put them there intended on keeping the zombies out, but boy oh boy. It was going to fucking hurt if they didn't stop in a couple of seconds. The tires screeched as Shizuka barely managed to keep the Humvee from running into the wires. Though, now they were on a straight collision course with the concrete wall of the underpass. Fucking fantastic. Just a couple of seconds before the Humvee and the wall got intimate, the brakes kicked in. Ray hadn't been ready for that apparently, and she went flying. After making a split-second check to see if his mother was safe, he acted quickly and grabbed Ray before she slammed into the hood of the Humvee. With Ray safe in his arms, Naruto landed on the ground just in front of the Humvee. Multiple gunshots rang out as the zombies closest to him hit dropped. Kushina had gotten off of the roof of the Humvee and was dropping zombies with ease. One had gotten a tad too close for his liking, but before it could grab onto her, Kushina used the barrel of her gun to swipe the feet from under the zombie and shot it straight in the face. Naruto was strangely aroused at the fact that his mom was being an absolute badass. He'd comment on that later. Naruto let Ray down before joining in on the fight. Wind-laced shurikens tore through the hordes of the dead. Savage kicks and punches obliterated most of them, as even more gunfire rang out around him. Every member of their group, excluding the three who couldn't really fight, was fighting. Though, no matter how many they killed, more seemed to come. He could see the desperation on their faces, and Takashi and Siko had the looks of people who wanted to play the hero. People who tried to be the hero died. Well, they usually died unless you were him. Everyone, get back! Naruto shouted as he went through hand signs and began molding his chakra. He wanted to make sure everyone was outside of his blast radius before he used this jutsu. Seeing that everyone was all clear, Naruto went ahead and used the jutsu that was feared in the Fourth Great War. Fire style, Great Fire Annihilation. A wall of orange flames spread throughout the 4-lane road as it bathed the zombies in hellfire, reducing them all to ash. There were a couple of stragglers who weren't inside his radius, though nothing like before. They didn't last very long. Naruto dropped to one knee as beads of sweat went down his face. He didn't even think he had enough chakra to use that. His reserves were growing by leaps and bounds, apparently. Thank God for that. How he knew the jutsu was beyond him, but he wasn't complaining. Maybe God wasn't such an asshole when they decided to throw him into this universe. The footsteps of multiple people from behind him drew his attention as his cerulean eyes landed on at least 20 people suited in firemen's suits. A tad late for reinforcements, Kushina remarked with a neutral face as she shot the last zombie. Better late than never, Naruto simply said as his mother helped him off the ground. Thanks. Try not to overexert yourself, okay? Kushina chastised him with a mock glare. Hi, Naruto said as he waved off his mother's worries. Ka-san! Saya shouted, drawing his attention as he saw Saya leaping into the arms of a beautiful woman. Said woman had long, light purple hair and purple eyes. Even with the fireman's suit on, he could tell that she had a killer body. An elbow to his ribs made him double over in pain as he looked at the woman responsible. His mother just stood there with a mask of indifference on her face as she hummed, causing him to sweat drop. She only had an impassive look in public if she was disappointed. Though, that wasn't this. Are you jealous? Naruto asked with a groan as he watched her for her reaction. Shut up. You are. Naruto just laughed as Kushina elbowed him once again. It wasn't every day he got to see his mother be flustered, but when he did, it was great. I'm assuming you're one of Saya's friends, and you're his girlfriend? Saya's mother said with a voice that was as smooth as silk while she walked up to both of them. I'm his mother. Kushina deadpanned as she ground her elbow in Naruto's ribcage. I guess you could say we're friends. You know how she is, Naruto said, ignoring the firecracker digging her elbow into his side. I know all too well. Thank you for taking care of Saya and bring her home to me. You're both welcome to stay in our estate for the time being, Saya's mother said as she bowed her to them. We'll take you up on your offer to Kagi-san, Kushina said as she bowed her head to the woman in return. Please, both of you, just call me Yuriko. I feel old when people address me like that, Yuriko said with a laugh as her purple eyes met his cerulean eyes. What was it with women with purple and violet eyes always being absolute bombshells? The walk to the Takagi estate was uneventful though. He sort of welcomed that. It was nice to not worry about fighting off a horde or two while walking down a street. Though, he wasn't going to get too comfortable. Comfort breeds complacency. Naruto knew that this wasn't going to blow off in a year or two. They'd have to get comfortable with the idea of having the dead roam the earth until they were eradicated. He'd just take things one step at a time. Also, the estate was fucking massive. Walls were walling off the entirety of the estate, and a sturdy metal gate as the primary entrance. The mansion alone was 10 times the size of the apartment they lived in. There was a mechanic's shop from the look of it, and multiple tents set up for temporary housing. This was just in the estate alone. On the way here, he had noticed that they had used machines to erect walls and barricades to prevent the entry of the dead. Armed guards were patrolling the street when they walked by, and he could see people looking at them from inside their houses. To think that Saya's parents had orchestrated all of this with what was going on was mind-boggling. The inside of the mansion was the very definition of extravagant. Paintings that looked expensive lined the walls, and all of the furniture was ornate-looking. They obviously spared no expense on the interior of the building. A maid led them to Naruto's group to their rooms on the second floor. "And here's your room. If you two need anything, I'll be down the hall," the maid said as she bowed and left. "Well, at least it's nice," Kushina remarked as she looked around the room. She had placed her weapons on the study desk and walked over to an adjoining room. "We even have our own bathroom." Naruto just plopped down onto the king-sized bed and let out a happy sigh. Kushina practically leapt onto the beside him on the bed as she let out a moan. He didn't say anything as he decided to close his eyes for a moment. He couldn't really blame her. They had slept on the floor of an apartment and a chair on a bus. It just felt great to rest on a bed again. "It feels like we're a couple who just got done sightseeing on their honeymoon," Kushina said with a teasing tone as a smile made its way onto her face. "I don't think I've heard of very many mother and son couples," Naruto said as he cracked one eye open to look at the smiling vixen beside him. Kushina just hummed in response as she rested her head on his chest. That made him raise an eyebrow. Was that a hum of approval? No way, right? "Hey," Naruto said, gaining Kushina's attention, who looked at him curiously. "How does starting your training tomorrow sound?" he asked with a smile. "Really? I can't wait," Kushina exclaimed with an eager smile on her face. "We'll start first thing in the morning," Naruto replied as he yawned. "Sounds great," Kushina replied before her eyes fluttered closed, and her breathing evened out. It didn't take long for the sweet embrace of sleep to hit him. He felt his eyelids growing heavy. 1,000 things were on his mind even as sleep slowly overtook him. The growing relationship between him and his mother, how it was so wrong but felt so right. With his mother safely secured in his arms, Naruto joined his mother in blissful slumber. Chapter end. Now watch daily exclusive and censored lemon stories and mature content, along with NSFW images, featuring harem girls characters from the fics. Access all this and more on my Patreon. Click the link in the description to explore.